My name is Justin Rempel. Today we are going to learn all about punctuation. So the first type of punctuation we're going to look at is the types of punctuation that come at the end of a sentence, right? So a sentence is a complete idea, it's a full thought, it's going to have a subject or a topic and a verb or an action. Sometimes there's extra parts. You can have an object as well, which is kind of the thing that the action happens to. And you can add in all sorts of additional clauses and phrases to structure your sentence. But it's going to be a full idea, and you're going to reach the end of a sentence, and you're going to have one of these three types of punctuation at the end of the sentence. You're going to have a period, or a question mark, or an exclamation point, depending on what type of sentence it is. So the most common type of punctuation you find at the end of a sentence is a period. Period is a dot. It indicates a full stop, which if you're reading out loud or even in your head, you're going to take a significant pause once you reach the period. There's two kinds of sentences that end this way. A declarative sentence, which is the most common kind of sentence. It's just a statement, right? A fact. There are lots of clouds in the sky today. Insects have 6 legs. Most of the sentences that we speak in are statements or declarative sentences. But periods can also end commands, such as go clean your room, which we call an imperative sentence. Question marks come at the end of questions, which we also call interrogative sentences. Most questions begin with one of the question words. The 5 W's are 1H, who, what, where, when, why, and how. Who are you? Where are you going? What is that in your hand? Why would you say that? How are you feeling? Okay, these are all questions, and when we get to the end of a question, we have this special symbol called a question mark to let us know that it is in fact a question. The only other type of way that we can end a sentence properly is with an exclamation point, sometimes called an exclamation mark. And this really indicates any kind of strong emotion. It could be any kind of strong emotion, joy, fear, anger, but it's going to be something really strongly felt. This is the best day of my life. Look out for that piece of glass, right? Anything that you would put a little extra emotion into when you're saying it out loud, you're going to put an exclamation point at the end of that sentence. You can also get exclamation points after this special part of speech called an interjection, which is just 1 or 2 words that really shows the strong emotion. And these can also be called exclamations, right? So yikes, ow, hey, or even look out, right? A word or two. It's really not a full sentence on its own, but we put an exclamation mark after it because these are things that we say when we are feeling something very strongly. The other type of punctuation we're going to look at is everything else, mid-sentence punctuation, things that come throughout a sentence. There's all sorts. They serve a real variety of purposes. They're used to indicate a variety of things, from pauses. Lots of them indicate breaks or pauses, but they'll show you when someone's speaking. They'll show you when something's a side note or the main idea. And they can appear at the bottom, middle, or top of the written line. So here in brackets, you see a really good example, commas, which always come right at the bottom of our line when we're writing, a dash or a hyphen, which comes right in the middle of our written line, and an apostrophe, which comes up top. So you really want to pay attention to where on the written line these forms of punctuation appear, because it actually changes what they mean sometimes. So one of the most common types of punctuation is the comma. A comma indicates a short pause in a sentence. It's just this little curly, and it's at the bottom of a line, okay? Don't put it in the middle, don't put it at the top, it'll change the meaning. It has to come at the bottom of the written line. It's not as complete or full of a stop as a period, it's just a short pause. So if you're reading out loud or in your head, you should be taking a little natural break. And it's used to separate clauses or phrases from each other. It helps to keep our sentences organized and structured so all the words don't blur into each other. And sometimes it's used to separate sentences. We can use them to create compound sentences. But let's take a look at the clauses first. We are going to the lake, which is far away. Okay, which is far away is a descriptive clause, and we've used a comma to separate it from the rest of the sentence and keep it nice and organized. Okay. The dog, who was big and friendly, barked happily. So here we've got two commas, one at each end of the clause, who was big and friendly. This is just a clause that's describing, it's telling us what the dog is like, and we've got a comma at either end, bookending this clause to keep it separate from the rest of the sentence, to show us that this is a separate clause, and it helps us to keep track of what's happening, okay? The dog is the topic, and then we've got this descriptive clause, and then we get to the verb or the action at the end, barked happily. Even though we liked that town, we had to leave. Okay, so the main sentence is we had to leave, and there's a clause that comes at the start, even though we like that town. So you can see that clauses can come at the start, middle, or end of sentences. You can have multiple clauses. General rule of thumb, avoid having a whole bunch of extra clauses and commas, because then we start to get disorganized and lose track of our ideas very quickly. Simple is better. The last example is an example of a compound sentence. I am mad, but you are not. So this is two sentences. I am mad, you are not. And we've attached them together using a comma in the middle, and we've also used a joining word called a conjunction. In this case, it's but. There are many types of conjunctions, and, yet, and so on. A semicolon is used to separate two full sentences. So this is another way of constructing a compound sentence. We use it in place of a period. It is less of a break or pause than a period. We don't use semicolons very frequently, and especially if you're a beginning writer, I would steer clear of them. You don't really need them. We really only use them when our two sentences are closely related or we're making a comparison. So a semicolon is this dot above a comma, and it shows you that we've got two sentences here, but I haven't used a period in between because I want to show you something. I want to make a comparison or show you just how closely connected these two things are. So here's some examples. The tree was the tallest thing around. We used it as a landmark. Okay, you could just as easily put in a period in between and start a new sentence with we with a capital W, and it would be grammatically correct. But this writer thought that these two sentiments were close enough that they needed to actually be linked together in the same compound sentence, and so they used a semicolon to separate them. And notice that for the second sentence, we don't have a capital letter because it's still considered part of the same sentence, the same thing. She loved going to the beach. He hated it because of the hot sun and the gritty sand. So again, two closely related sentences joined with just a semicolon. There's no conjunction, no joining word, no capital letter for the second sentence. And we're making a comparison. She loves the beach. He hates it. A colon. A colon is a dot above a dot. And it's used to introduce lists and ideas. Again, this is not a very common type of punctuation. I would not use it if I was a beginning writer. But you'll notice I've been using it when I'm providing examples. I'll say example or examples, and then a colon, and then I'll provide a list of several examples. Here's some more examples. We had the following pets, colon, a dog, 2 cats, and a canary. These are my biggest fears, colon, spiders and darkness. So when I'm reading this, I wouldn't actually say colon, I would just pause. But the colon is a way of introducing a list of ideas or examples. Apostrophe. Apostrophe is a dash. It looks basically the same as a comma, but instead of being at the bottom of the written line, like the comma is, an apostrophe is up top. And we use it for a couple different reasons. One time we use it is in contractions. These are two words that are smushed together to form one word. And they're so smushed that we actually leave out some letters. We use the apostrophe to show where those letters are missing. So in can't, the O is missing from cannot, so we put a little apostrophe in to show where that's missing. They'll is short for they will. and we put a little apostrophe to show where the W and the I are missing. Its is short for it is, she'd is short for she would, we've is short for we have, and wherever the letters are missing, that's where the apostrophe goes. The other place we use apostrophes is in possessives. These are words that show ownership, okay? Justin's computer is not working. Okay, so to show ownership, we add on an S onto the end of the name Justin, but we also put an apostrophe in between the name and the S. These buildings are the company's property. We put an apostrophe in between company and the S. The property belongs to the company. Okay, it shows ownership. If you have a plural, like snakes, these are the snake's tongues, the apostrophe would come after the S and you would not add on an additional S. Okay, that's how you make plurals possessive. Quotation marks. Quotation marks are used to indicate quotes, speech, when someone is talking. Okay, so we put them at the start and the end of the spoken words. They bookend whatever is actually explicitly said. They kind of look like two apostrophes or commas. They're up top, at the top of the written line, and they look slightly different, the one at the start from the one at the end. So the opening quotation marks curl in towards the speech. The closing ones curl in towards the speech. At the start and the end, they kind of look like this. They curl together inwards towards the spoken words, opening and closing quotation marks. Here's some examples. I want to go home, she said. He told me, have fun on your trip. So you can see in both cases, there's quotation marks at the beginning and the ends of the words that are spoken, and then the describing words that introduce or serve as a signal phrase to tell us that someone's talking. Those are not in quotation marks, and they're separated from the quote by a comma. Parenthesis, or the plural if there's more than one, is parentheses. We also call these brackets. But in general, if we're talking about these rounded ones that look like semicircles, we do refer to them as parentheses properly. The opening parentheses or the opening bracket is curled in towards the speech. Same with the closing bracket at the end, kind of like the quotation marks. And we use parentheses to indicate an aside or a side note, which we often do for explanation or clarification. So for example, she works for the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency. Okay, so that in the parentheses is the explanation of what the abbreviation CIA stands for. My grandpa, my mom's father, is coming over for a visit. So you could have a maternal or a paternal grandpa, right, on your mom's or your dad's side. And this explanation in the parentheses just clarifies which side of the family you're talking about. I can take care of it after work today around 4:30 p.m. So that's a clarification of the exact time when you can get around to it. Often you can use commas in place of these parentheses for these asides, and it would still be grammatically correct. Okay, so if you're not confident about using these parentheses, I would just use commas instead. Other types of brackets. So these ones we often call brackets. They're much less common. Square brackets, for example, which kind of look like parentheses, but they're all right angles. They're all very square. We sometimes use those in editing. So if you're making changes to a written piece and you want to change the way something's written, you might put that note in square brackets. We also have these curly brackets, also called braces, which are sometimes used in science or math or computing. We don't ever really use them in English writing. And we also have angled brackets, also called chevrons, which are kind of like triangles. And those are sometimes used for side notes. Sometimes you see them indicating a foreign language. I might be writing in English, but this is actually in Mandarin, so I'll put it in angle brackets, or to reference a website. But in general, these are all quite rare forms of brackets, and I would just avoid them if I was a beginning writer. You don't really need any of these. But if you're looking at your keyboard and you're wondering what they mean, this is why they're there as options. Hyphen. A hyphen is a line in the middle. It joins two or more words together. We would call those hyphenated. These are often phrases or descriptor words, adjectives. So we might say, my mother-in-law is an excellent lawyer. Mother-in-law is one word. It's a hyphenated word made up of 3 words that are all joined together with hyphens. Mother-in-law. He is my ex-husband. Same thing. Ex and husband are joined together with a little dash in between, no spaces, just that little dash called a hyphen. We escaped the fire in a free-for-all. I am self-taught. Self-taught is one word. It's a hyphenated word. It's describing me. I taught myself. I am self-taught. Deep fried chicken is greasy and delicious, in this writer's opinion. Deep fried is an adjective. Deep and fried put together with a hyphen in the middle. Dash. A dash is also a line in the middle. It's slightly different than a hyphen. And there's 2 types of dashes. You can have an end dash, which is short. If you're typing or writing this, there's no spaces in between. And we use it to show a range of things. So April-October means from April to October. 1983-86 means from 1983 to 1986. 2 o'clock to 3:30. You can see we often use this for periods of time, right? The start time and the end time. We had 4 to 5 inches of rain is how I would read the next sentence. Notice that for the dash in between 4 and 5, I read it as 2. We had 4 to 5 inches of rain, showing a range of possible measurements. An em dash is a longer dash, and there are spaces in between if you're typing or writing this. It separates a clause or phrase from the rest of the sentence. I have 2 brothers, Sam and Wesley. The weather that day, totally unexpected for late April, was scorching hot. And you can hear how when I read it, I basically read it like a comma. I leave a little bit of a pause in between. I have 2 brothers, Sam and Wesley. Okay? There's spaces in between. It's an em dash, so it's a little bit longer than the short end dash. And it's separating that clause from the rest of the sentence. Slash. So we have a backslash or a backward slash and a forward slash. They just lean opposite ways, right? The backslash we use in computer coding. We would basically never use this in English writing. A forward slash can be used as punctuation. It leans forwards towards the next letters. It means and or. You might see it in informal writing like this. We were tired / thrilled about the award. That is your / my right. This river runs east / west. Often people will just say slash when they're reading it out loud. You could also substitute and or. We were tired and thrilled about the award. That is your or my right. Either one is correct. In general, though, this is a piece of punctuation from informal writing. If you're writing a formal paper or an assignment for a course, you shouldn't be using forward slashes. You should put in the word and or. The one time we do really use it in English is to show line breaks in poetry. So I can type this out. I am Sam, Sam I am. Do you like green eggs and ham? The very iconic line from Dr. Seuss, or set of lines rather. And I can tell exactly where the line breaks are because I put a little slash in between. You can also use a forward slash in a variety of creative ways. Sometimes people use it for fractions, 3/4, 3/4. Abbreviations without W/O, not available, N/A, and dates. The 21st day of the 3rd month of 2023 would be March 21st, 2023. Those can get confusing. Be careful because some people put the month first and then the day of the month. Some people put the day of the month and then the month. So be careful with the order when you're writing or reading those. Lastly, we're going to talk about the ellipsis, plural ellipses, which is 3 dots or periods in a row. Sometimes people put more. If you're using this in formal writing, which you shouldn't really that often, definitely don't do more than 3. We use this to indicate an extended pause, and you might use this when you're story writing to show a character pausing or thinking for a little bit of time. Often it shows up at the end of a sentence to show a thought that is really trailing off, that is inconclusive. I thought there would be more chances. And that ... really tells the reader that we don't know what the character's thinking next. They're probably wistfully thinking and regretting about all the chances they had, and their voice kind of trails off. Here's another example. Well, I'll have to go back to the store. So you can tell that after that initial well, the speaker is really thinking about how they're going to solve this problem. And after they think, after the ellipses, they decide they're going to go back to the store to solve their problem.